See how we do.
Hello and welcome back inside the Parc Fermé for podcast number 859, the US Grand Prix review. This is Todd.
No, Todd, not now.
AKA Negative Camera. You know what we do on race weekends.
We watch one, then we talk about it. Then we watch one, then we talk about it. Come on, Todd.
That's exactly what we do. But before doing that, I have to introduce my co-host, which of course means...
Rex from out of the wasteland. He's bad, he's beautiful, he's crazy. It's...
Hello, everybody. This is Paul Charles, the International.
How you doing, Paul?
I'm doing okay.
Paul, should we talk about the F1?
Yes, we should talk about the F1. Yes, sure. Why not? That's what we
Americans. Do you like? You're a fan of the F1? Yes, the F1. I am.
Yes, me like 'em F1, big time.
Me like 'em. Time for go to bed. Yes.
Talk no pretty.
Yes,
Yeah.
right. So the U.S. Grand Prix, Paul, it happened at a circuit just south of you, south of you, a few miles.
I'm sure people question why I wasn't there.
Yeah. Well, I did. I wouldn't even bring it up, but
I was
busy.
Yeah, I've been busy.
Yeah.
The only weekend I don't have at a racetrack, and it was bad timing by F1. I think
Yeah.
it was just that a little bit too much.
Well, they should have consulted you, and that's well, I'm beside myself with grief.
Yeah. I sent the Grish instead.
Good.
Hannah went down there. She now lives in Austin, so she went there on Friday. She gave me some reports.
Good. Nice. That's exciting. Well, let's talk about the race. It's a track It's a track you've driven on.
Sure.
It is a purpose-built racetrack here in America, unlike the other two Grand Prix. An incredible weekend for COTA, so big kudos to Bobby Epstein and the entire staff at Circuit of the Americas. They put on a great event this weekend, and it was a fun and exciting race. The track is terrific circuit. Today, certainly the talk is all about the bumps, and which may have prompted the DSQ or the disqualified for Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc. So people went to bed thinking one thing, and they woke up finding out that something
in their
different.
eyes.
I know. Yeah, there's this sort of, 10-ish% tolerance in the legality plank thickness, and both cars were found afoul of the measurement.
What you gonna do?
Yeah, well, they don't check all the cars after every session because that would take an eternity to do, way too much time. So it's a random process, or if there's key indicators that the car could be out of compliance, they'll check those cars. Verstappen and Norris's cars were checked too, just in case, you're dredging up conspiracy theories. They both were found to be compliant, and one could argue that Max's higher rake, actually, they had that dialed up a little bit. May have been the reason he kind of went wide during qualifying and struggled a little bit this weekend. Qualified down in 6th, just a hypothesis of mine. But now, before you get upset, though, about this whole thing, and there have been a lot of people all upset on social media, you can imagine, Paul. They're just apoplectic over the whole disqualification. Mainly for Lewis, but some from Charles. And there is precedence. It happened to Schumacher in '94 at Spa. He was disqualified. The FIA have zero tolerance on this issue. None. Right? If it's under, it's under. You're toast. That's the way it is. Zero tolerance on this. It's a bit like a white line. So, and remember, there's now more measuring points because, of all that porpoising that was happening, and they added a couple different locations that they're measuring from because, all the fans were just, outraged at the safety reasons that, oh my gosh, this porpoising, and everybody was mad because Max was the only car that wasn't, basically, and so everybody was outraged by that, and so they added these things. You reap what you sow. Reminder to all the teeth gnashing about more passing and that gave us DRS and HD tires. Then you were outraged by the porpoising because everyone, again, mad that Max didn't suffer as much in Red Bull, so we get more measurement points and more scrutineering of the skid plank because of the ride height issue to ensure that we're not porpoising. Then, you were outraged that not all the cars were checked. That would take the entire length of the entire race to check all the cars in detail like that. It would take several hours to do that. That's not realistic. And then you were apoplectic over the track limit issues. Remember, Paul, when Charlie Whiting said, look, there's 13 corners on here, only 3 of them. If you go a little wide, you're going to get an advantage. Remember that? Yeah. And then it was just those 3 corners. And sometimes they would monkey with those corners and a little bit of it. It was basically those. And everybody was just apoplectic about it. They're so outraged that now we have white lines everywhere, right? Yay. So effectively, you have a tire race now with DRS and dozens of track limit infractions. So be careful what you wish for, folks. Just a quick reminder. Apart from that, though, COTA has really been racking up a history of just really good races of late.
Yeah, but I want to go back to the scrutineering part. All racing series have scrutineering, have Parc Fermés after the race. No racing series checks everything on everything car after the race, or the same thing at the end of every race. It's always a revolving door, and it's haphazard to try and keep the teams in check. I don't know what's going to be checked this week. I don't know who's going to be checked this week. So it kind of hopefully self-polices. Yes, as you said. Sometimes there's some indicators, and there's a lot of systems on the cars that are now checking ride heights because of the porpoising, etc. So they had a lot of information that kind of led them down that road at this point. I'm pretty impressed actually that they actually wore out the plank with the porpoising, because I thought the cars were having to run, higher than was a positive step in their performance, and they've obviously figured that out. And now they've dropped the cars down to that minimum where they're scraping the ground and still eliminating some of the porpoising. So they've done a lot in the chassis alignment and suspension systems to eliminate the porpoising and being able to load the cars a little bit. So there is no foul play in the scrutineering check. This is normal day of business for these people. As I said, in IMSA we have to do it all the time, and every time we go in there, they're checking something different. They're having you take the brakes apart, they're having you check the fuel, all those kind of things. But whenever a team goes out, they know what the compliance is, and you always give yourself a little bit of room for error, right? Without, when we go with the IMSA cars, we weigh them, we recheck and double check, and then check in our fuel capacities, all these things during a weekend. And we take them the scrutineering and back and forward and back just to make sure we're still in compliance, because we change things on the car, maybe some setup changes. Could that change where our ride height is? And sometimes we find, oh, shoot, we're a little light. We don't know why, but we'll add weight, or vice versa. We're a little heavy. How do we feel? Obviously in Formula One, every little bit, even more than in GT cars, adds performance or takes it away. So that's why the Formula One teams probably take it more to an edge. But that's the game you play. And it was obviously an advantage here at COTA, because they found 2 cars that are actually 2 separate manufacturers entirely that had the same issue.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And people say, well, why didn't they check other cars? Because they scored in the points and they made, okay, yeah, but it's not feasible to check every single car.
It's not.
And the other thing is, it was. I find it kind of interesting. Talk about kicking a theory down while it's down. The teams immediately said, "Whoa, problem was you had this sprint race, the sprint thing. We only had 1 hour FP1, and we didn't get to run low fuel loads and really set the car up." Max was just like, so now the scapegoat is the sprint. You wanted to sprint, don't come into the press and start bitching that you didn't have enough time to test out your setups because of the sprint. You wanted to sprint, come on, man.
Everyone's in the same boat though, right? So
everybody's in the same boat.
So you want to check
Yeah.
everything, then go
Yeah,
check
yeah.
it in practice one. That's the way it is.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that would add to this. Fuel load, certainly weight, compression of the car, the setup, the physical setup of the car. Even to the point, Paul, I'm thinking if you ran long stints, as the rubber wears off, the tread wears off, the tire heats up, you can bleed out, some PSI, that tire a little bit. That'll adjust your hide right incrementally. There's a lot of factors at play there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, the sprint, we were talking about it when it was going on, right? What would you do different? It is weird that you lock in your qualifying for the race so early in the weekend, and then the cars are in Parc Fermé. I think that's wrong.
Yeah, it's backwards.
I think you don't lock the Parc Fermé issues in till you do first of all, you do the race qualifying after you do the sprint qualifying.
Yep.
And as we were talking about, hey, just give a different format for the sprint qualifying. That might make it single car qualifying. Just do something different. I think the format of qualifying the same way twice in a weekend is a bit laborious and boring.
It is. Yeah, I texted and said we don't need 3 sessions, 3 shootout sessions. You just need 2. The first session eliminates 11 through 20, and the second session determines the top 10.
Yeah, dude, make it simple, stupid.
Yeah, exactly.
And
right.
or a single car qualifying. If you want to mix it up, do something else.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
I'm
just kind of done with the sprint race. Of course, I'm on record. You can go back. I've not been a fan of the sprint ever since it was introduced. I feel like they could really work on revamping the entire qualifying process and really make Saturday a day of qualifying, and they could do a lot of things around that. But instead of a sprint, I'm not. And I agree with Paul. I feel like the qualifying on Friday should be for the sprint. After the sprint, then you qualify for the Sunday and set your car up for long run pace, heavy fuel loads, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I think it is tough to have one practice session, then all you're doing is shootouts.
Yeah,
you're doing a shootout qualifying. You're doing shootout race. You're doing another shootout qualifying. It's a bit too much in your face, quite honestly. And some of the things we like to ponder about over a Grand Prix weekend are lost on these sprint weekends.
Yeah, they really are.
The nuances of Formula One. They're doing away with it, and it's becoming a basketball shootout. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree, and I'm not marginalizing Mercedes saying the sprint and made it. I agree with them. It does. It makes it difficult. That's why you should just do away with them. Make me happy.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about the team, shall we? Let's jump in.
Yeah, we can.
Whatever. Let's just wrap this podcast up.
It was a good race, though.
It was a good race. I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Let's start off sharp in Red Bull, Sergio Perez. And I know what you're asking.
You like my face? You like it?
Tough,
Sergio.
Another tough weekend, Sergio.
It was. And you had Max Verstappen in P1. No, Max started in P6, remained patient as he moved forward through the field, but he was nursing a braking issue very early on. And this meant that the other teams may have they wouldn't have known that he was nursing a braking issue early, right?
Not till he started mentioning it.
Yeah, until he started F-bombing and stuff, on the radio. He went full Yuki. You never go full Yuki, and he did. And but as he was patiently kind of slowly working his way back up to the field, I have to think that Mercedes at that point wouldn't have known. They may have felt that Max is just managing tires, managing pace, and they were probably watching that pretty close. It's what I would have thought. It is what I thought when he was not coming back, full force. But
I think he was doing that to some degree, but yeah.
Yeah. But probably, I think, being down at P6 and jumping Leclerc or Sainz at the beginning, I think they thought they'd make short work of it. But it took quite a while. So they figured, maybe they figured he's got pace in hand and he's managing his tires. I mentioned that because I wonder if that played into the other team's strategy, sort of like Mercedes did. I'm just trying to parse Mercedes' strategy out a little bit. He passed Norris during the first stint, but the brake issue meant that he didn't walk away with it once he got in the lead. He was just 2 seconds ahead of Hamilton's Merc at the end. I think you have to give a hat tip to Red Bull for that early stop from Max. In my mind, Paul, that early stop sort of froze the teams a little bit, kind of played their hand on their strategy, didn't want to get undercut, overcut. We're going to have to execute it. And it kind of forced those potential one-stopping teams like Lewis and others. Do we want to really hang on this one-stopper? Or if we run Red Bull's strategy and Max's pace out, is that one-stopper going to kill us? Should we go to that two-stopper? Ultimately, Mercedes choosing to go with the two-stopper. So I think that early stop by Red Bull, I think they managed this race very well. It galvanized the other strategies at that point. The track was hotter than on Saturday. Max had to get through 5 people, manage the tires, struggle with the braking issue. But then, the team kept the strategy cards close to their chest. And that early stop was a little bit of a masterstroke that coupled with Mercedes waiting maybe a little bit, gave them the edge. So I think that was good. It was Max's 15th win of the season, 50th in his career. And by achieving 50 wins in his career and the 15th win of the season, the U.S. fans very proudly celebrated his achievement with booze. This is a very poor form.
Please.
Very poor form.
Just stop, people.
Yeah, come on,
Just
man.
stop. So you see that the woman in the stands when Lewis went by the McLaren, she was all in that other person's face.
I know.
Was great. I'm like, oh, I've never seen this at Formula One. I've seen a hockey game, but I've never seen this at Formula One event.
She was like ready to throw down, man.
It
was like,
she was
what?
all about it.
I know.
It was funny to watch, but you just can imagine what was going in. What verbiage was going on in the stands leading up to that point.
I know.
I'm sure there was a lot of barbs going back and forth about drivers.
I'm
just
sure.
bizarre to me that this is happening in Formula One. It's just,
I know.
I've never seen it before. It's crazy.
I know. It's just out of control. And I posted a TikTok of that, and I said it was a video of her putting her hand in the face of the McLaren guy and all up in his grill and everything. And the text I put on there, I wonder how she feels about the disqualification. She's probably not very happy this morning, So
not very happy. She's probably outside that McLaren fence with a can.
Yeah, right. Gotcha. Yeah. So
Cape Fear action, but I think I got a thought about the Verstappen thing. I think what initially he had jump on the one Ferrari, but then he took his time because he saw that the pace, of the others was kind of probably higher than he wanted to achieve on that set of tires. Remember, Max is in a pretty enviable position. He's got the best car. He can afford to be a little patient. And I think he was letting them work their way out and just sit back for a couple laps and then just slowly, gradually get through rather than try and dive himself right into that big fight at the beginning. So I think it was calculated. Yeah, maybe he had that braking issue from the very beginning, but I also think perhaps that braking issue brought him into that pit stop early. Maybe they can evaluate what's going on with the car when they do the pit stop. They've got cameras, etc. Maybe it could have been something to do with that set of tires. Maybe they were thinking it could have been, but I think maybe that braking issue may kind of force them to do that early pit stop. Could have been just their pure strategy, but I would think if you're dealing with an issue, you try to get in the pits as early as you can and try and identify the problem. And the two-pit strategy was going to work for them anyway because they had the pace. So I think that kind of maybe gave them a bit of a percentage as to why they came in that early as well.
Well, they went medium because McLaren had held back 2 hards, so they just offset that, and that was really kind of the fun of this race. It was all the varying offset strategies.
Sure was.
That's what made it really fun. And I think that's track specific, but it would be great if we'd see more of that on certain tracks where teams are rolling dice, running offset strategies to each other, and there's some of that happens in every Grand Prix, whether they start on mediums or softs and those kind of things. There's some of that, but this was all in,
Yeah, it was very followable. It wasn't like a madcap, crazy.
It was easier. Kind of it was easier for those of us at home to kind of follow those offset strategies. And kudos to Crofty and Martin. I think they did a good job of tracking that for us as people listening at home. Sergio jumped Russell in the pit stop cycle, got passed by Leclerc, but I think to your point, Paul, I think that final stint on medium showed just how quickly the rear deg could happen as he kind of chewed his tires up too much. And this may have highlighted what Max was able to achieve early on in that traffic, trying to get by 5 cars. And to your point, he's nursing a braking issue, but he may have been managing that pace and managing those rears, whereas that second medium stint on Sergio showed how easy it is to overdo it and chew those rears up.
Yeah.
And
Sergio's usually good on tires, right?
he is,
but he's just out of sorts. He's just not.
Yeah.
He's looking average, and he's not average. So something, I don't know. I feel bad for him, but man, I just don't. I don't see him being there next year at this point.
Yeah, I think he's driving for his career. I mean, he says he's 100% confident. I'm sure he is, but boy, it's tough.
Well, yeah.
Because this is a perfect race where Max could have used Sergio running in second, running tail gunner, right?
Yeah.
And had Sergio, and I'm not casting aspersion on Sergio. You know, Paul and I love Sergio. We think he's a great guy, and we think he's a hell of a race car driver. If you go back and listen to my rant on him on his first season in Formula One at Monaco and how impressed I was with him. But even if he was running second, third, fourth, it at least gives Red Bull much more control over strategy to control that race, right? But when you're down 6th, 7th, 8th, and Max is leading or in second place or third, it doesn't give you a lot of cards in your hand to play.
Yeah. No, it doesn't. And the grid is getting closer to Red Bull. They've had their day. I mean, I still think, without the brake issue, maybe Max still had a handy amount, but Sergio didn't, and he's still not getting there. And I don't think they can play with 1.5 drivers, so to speak. I'd love to see Sergio find his mojo again. I would love that because I do like Sergio, but Red Bull aren't usually ones to be very patient with these kind of things.
Yeah, they're not.
And there are some other drivers on the grid that could possibly jump right in who are outperforming their car right now. And maybe
Albon comes to mind.
Right. Could be a lot bigger a support to Verstappen. Yeah, Albon more than anybody because he knows the system. They know him.
Yeah, right.
They sent him off a bit too early, but I'm sure Albon would love to jump in a car like that.
I'm sure Albon would have looked really good in that AlphaTauri this weekend. I'm just saying, Franz. Well, regardless, with Lewis's DSQ, this keeps Sergio in second of the Drivers' Championship for now, and that's Red Bull's goal. So, so there is that. Let's talk about McLaren. Lando Norris P2, Oscar Piastri at DNF. Lando had a good start.
I love Lando.
I love Marry Me, Lando.
I love Lando.
Oh man, I put in my race report, man. I think it's awesome how many fans and how Lando has become sort of F1's darling, The whole crowd is chanting Lando, Lando, Lando. And I know those old school Lewis fans aren't happy about that, but it happens. It just happens, It was like Vettel came in and they weren't chanting Schumacher, or Alonso came in. The changing of the guard is inevitable, and everybody's like, even Sky Sports, a commentary, just constantly chomping at the bit for this Lewis versus Max thing. And the only thing I can think of is that they just want restitution for Abu Dhabi. But the reality of it is Lewis isn't in Max's generation. What I enjoyed about this race is watching Max battle his peers, Lando, George, Carlos, Charles. This is the battle. This is the fun watching those. If Lewis has got the car and still the chops, and this weekend says he does, then more power to him. But I really like watching that younger generation go at it, hammer and tongs. It's great. He jumped Leclerc. And then held on to that lead for quite a while, even keeping the lead after the first stops, which I thought was impressive, right? He couldn't keep Max behind him ultimately, and he eventually couldn't keep Hamilton behind him late in the race. The team said they were pushing for a win, and Lando said that the first 10 laps on both sets of tires, Paul, were good, but that the degradation was just too much, and perhaps pushing hard is what caused some of the inconsistency in the stints, according to Andrea Stella. He said that's kind of what happened. The first 10 laps were good, but we were pushing for a win, and that's kind of created the inconsistency in the degradation, inconsistency anyway, what caused
Not sure how that works out. I would more likely say it was the big wind change and gusts and inconsistency. I mean, your tires wear down to a point, but usually it does make them inconsistent. It just makes them slower. But
Yeah, right.
okay,
Right.
we'll go with it.
We'll go with
More
it.
than me. Yeah,
I'm reading team comments,
Yeah.
so you got to take all that with a grain of salt. But that's
Yes,
what
you
he
do.
said.
yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, a very good run for Lando, that's for sure.
Yeah, no, it was great. I thought it was superb run by
Yeah.
Lando,
Yeah.
and I think it's great that McLaren are going for the win and not just
Yeah.
giving it over to Max and say we'll do the best we can behind him. They
Right.
thought and did have a shot at it. Ultimately didn't come out, but they definitely were so much closer than they've been previously in most races. I was more impressed with how Lando was able to stay with Max for quite
Yeah,
a
me
while,
too.
even after Max got by him. Obviously he was
Yeah.
using the DRS to kind of stay up, but he was there, and we weren't sure whether he was nursing those hards or not. And in the beginning when Max ran him down, but
Right.
ultimately when Max got around, your choice is gone. You got to go for another pit stop. But
Yeah.
it was good. I think he drove an incredibly good race, and I think this is with McLaren's performance upping, it's going to be an interesting last few races.
Yeah, for sure. Oscar, tough weekend. Had a clash with Ocon at the first lap, forced him to retire the car. It was tough for him. But regardless, they were going for the win, and I thought that was great. Maybe when Oscar parked his car, maybe that changed a little bit because the manufacturers, constructors championship is on the line. By Lando finishing in P2, the disqualification. Of Charles Leclerc and everything, with both Aston Martins being down the order, this means that McLaren moves up. They have 4 podiums in the row now, does McLaren, and they managed to pass Aston Martin for 4th in Constructors' Championship with Lando's P2, which, as I say a million times, that's worth millions of dollars.
It is. It seems like a season ago that Aston Martin actually had a competitive car at this
Doesn't
point.
it?
And it seems like it just tells you how many points Alonso put on the board at the beginning of the season,
Yeah.
that it's taken this long since it's because McLaren have been on song for a while. It's taken this long for McLaren to grab that constructors championship back.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
impressive on both sides, quite honestly. Impressive
It is.
what Aston did at the first half of the season, and very impressive how McLaren have come back to get back up in the constructors fight.
Yeah, kudos to the men and women of Woking. They worked their tails off for that, and to turn that car around the way they did is really impressive. Very impressed with what they've done. Not as impressed am I with my my Ferrari. Charles Leclerc disqualification. Carlos
I wouldn't
Sainz
be.
P3. Yeah, I know it's kind of yes. Leclerc. So let's move on to Mercedes. So Leclerc lost out to Norris at turn 1 at the start, lost a place to Hamilton. Things get odd from there because the teams seem like they're completely augured in on that whole Leclerc one-stopper, even kind of knowing, even though Mercedes tacked to a two-stopper, albeit late, they moved Lewis to a two-stopper, and this basically meant that Leclerc would be assured of finishing behind his teammate Sainz, which he did, and he also finished behind Perez. So he went from pole to 6th, while Max went from 6th to P1, which is what a contrast.
Yeah.
And Charles wasn't happy about it, on the radio either. I don't know. It's one of those things where, once again, Ferrari seemed to struggle with making the aggressive strategy changes like Merck did. And the radio comms running through the strategy permutations makes them look a bit junior league. It's like, well, all right, if you could open your spreadsheet and check tab D, do you want to try that strategy? What about tab C? What if we stayed with B? You think he could get, it's just, I don't know.
Well, just the conversations alone, it's bizarre that they're asking him. He's not in the place to make those decisions. I don't think. I mean, you can ask certain opinions about a tire, but I think the conversations, even when they talk to Lando, it's like, well, what do you think of this? Oh yeah, let's go for it, whatever. But the permutations of A, B, C, or D, which door are you going to choose?
Right.
Leclerc, and it's like, I don't care. You've already screwed me.
Yeah,
I'm already
yeah,
done. It's too late. We're like, what is it? Like 5 minutes left in the race, and you're asking me what strategy we need to change to? Come on, guys.
right. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, it's like five minutes left, and you're like, okay, do you think we ought to go to straight? What the hell, man?
yeah,
I'm off the
yeah.
podium anyway. So yeah,
Did someone
very.
nod off in the middle of the race and just woke up
Fred,
and had
wake
the
up!
strategy on red alert on the screen?
I
Change
know.
strategy now. Oh shoot, this
Uh,
was about 10 minutes ago.
I
Don't tell
know.
anybody.
It's crazy. Carlos had the
Yeah.
better, two-stop strategy. Looked quick late in the race.
Yeah.
I thought he ran out of laps, unfortunately, to challenge Norris. Fred said that Carlos's strategy worked, but Leclerc's strategy, that was set well before the race, and their data said that there wasn't a big difference between a one and two stopper, which is interesting because Christian Horner after the race said that it was clear to them their data and simulations clearly showed that a two stopper was the best.
Yeah.
It's a
When
little
was the last
interesting 'cause it
time
was-
a long when was the last time a long strategy worked?
it's a good point.
You don't want to be
Yeah,
left at the end of a race
you
driving on
don't.
ice
Yeah,
and
yeah,
expect
yeah,
to come off. I just don't. I haven't seen that. Maybe it's been this year, but in my head, it always pays to be able to fight with something at the end of a race.
especially with these HD tires. I think that kind of neuters that. Maybe in the
Hmm.
past you had really good race tires, period. And if you manage to nurse those early on and ran them long, you might still have some grip
Right.
left. It's kind of like
There was a time
MotoGP.
people ran a whole race
I
on a set
know.
of tires.
Imagine,
Can you
it's like
imagine?
it's like
Yeah.
MotoGP. They either pick the soft or harder compound, and that's what they've got for the
Yeah.
entire race. So they manage them.
Right.
And then towards this Phillip Island race was amazing. The last 10 laps, and you could
Right.
see
Right.
them. They had to nurse those tires for a good portion of the race, but boy, those last 10 laps, they turn it on.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. The two stopper was clearly the way to go. But it is interesting that I think this race was right on the cusp as they did strategy and data. But then everybody after the race said, well, we only had 1 hour. It was a sprint. And so we really couldn't come up with the perfect strategy because we didn't get a lot of wrong runs in. So everybody's bitching and moaning about the sprint ruining their strategy for the race. It's like, you wanted to sprint. I don't know what to tell you. Let's talk about Mercedes.
Get in there, Lewis.
Lewis Hamilton disqualification. George Russell P5 inherited. Lewis looked great all weekend, and although he got squeezed at the
Yeah.
start, losing a place to Sainz, he managed to get back by both Ferraris and was clearly the second fastest car on the weekend. The first rough spot was leaving Lewis out too long, trying to make that one stopper, or as they debated that one stopper, as they felt Max. And here's what I'm thinking: did they feel that Max was just managing pace and weren't aware of the brake issues early on? The problem was that Lewis's tires did kind of hit a wall right at lap 20. They wanted to go to what was it, lap 23 or 24, but
Yeah.
his tires pretty much, remember, he locked up coming into what was 11 or whatever. His tires pretty much hit the
Yeah.
wall. So they boxed him. They went ahead and boxed him, but it was 4 laps later than Max had. And the same thing really kind of played out for Russell too. They ended up boxing him, but even later than Lewis, right? So having had that, Lewis said, "Oh man, you guys left me a huge gap," and they did. But he managed to get back through the traffic, past Norris, and finish just 2 seconds behind Max, who was nursing a brake issue. The disqualification was the second rough spot for Lewis, obviously, as they missed the optimum setup, blamed the lack of running during the sprint weekend, as well as the bumpy circuit, new upgrades that they weren't completely 100% on top of. That makes sense. They weren't quite sure how those total upgrades would work. That could add a factor to it. But two real rough spots from what I would consider a fantastic weekend for Lewis.
Oh yeah, for the team and for Lewis. About
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, we'll take the disqualification, whatever. We'll put that aside because I mean, the performance-wise, I don't think would have changed very much at all. It was
No.
just something they got wrong and whatever. But I think Lewis was on it every
Yeah.
single lap. I mean, maximizing. He was passing cars. He was not abusing the tires. Obviously the
Yeah.
tires went off. He made that one error at 11 that cost him a couple of seconds, maybe. That ultimately may have brought him onto the rear tail of Verstappen. But all that aside, I think he drove an incredible race, and he
Yeah.
didn't give up. And that last stint on the mediums, I think they put him for the last set of the mediums perfectly, where he can maximize the mediums without them hitting the wall.
Yep.
They couldn't have pitted it any earlier than that. It did seem like an unsurmountable amount of time to make up, but he did it. And yeah, he was so close on Max's, and he passed Lando. I thought it was an incredible drive by him.
Yeah, great drive. George had a tough weekend. He had track limit penalties, just missing out on passing Leclerc, but he did inherit fifth due to Lewis's disqualification. From my standpoint, I think there's a marked difference in the pace between Lewis versus George of late. If
right.
George is, and I'm not 100% sure I understand really why George is struggling more than Lewis right now. I think Lewis fans would say, well, because Lewis's head is totally in the game. He never gives up. He's a fighter. And I think all that's true. But I don't think George is the kind of driver that's this far off of that pace. So I'm not sure what's going on with George, but he needs to turn that around.
I think it's less about George and more about Lewis, honestly.
Yeah, it could be.
Because they say Lewis is always 100%. I'm not so sure about that.
No, I've seen Lewis not 100%.
In history, Lewis comes into seasons at a little bit of a low ebb on what he can ultimately achieve. We've seen it in the past.
Yeah.
And obviously, when you're struggling with the car, a 7-time world champion has a little bit of trouble bringing, the 110% or whatever you want to call it every time. It's a realistic. We're all human beings. We can't just lift ourselves up to the top maximum level every single time. But I think he's seeing the gains in the car, the positivity of the car is coming around to him, and so he's seeing what the potential of what the achievement could be, which is a race.
Some motivation.
And that I think that is going to lift the 7-time world champion to be back at that kind of level. You can say what you will. I just think that's there, and I think George is still young, and I think he needs to adjust to that kind of level that Lewis just kicked it up to.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's hard to keep that level and that motivation when you're a guy that's won 7 titles. As you get older, there's a lot of other things about life getting in the way, and your interest, and he could be forgiven for having his eye on different things or his interest. But the reality of it is he showed up this weekend, drove a fantastic race. Let's talk about Alpine. Pierre Gasly in P6, Esteban Ocon, a DNF. Ocon had that clash with Piastri, lap 1, had to retire the car. But Pierre, in his awesome Francois Cervera helmet.
Wasn't that great?
Oh, it was awesome.
Love it.
I love it when drivers do those nods to great drivers in the past. And Cervera, who better to do it? He dropped a few places at the start, but worked his way back up into the points, inheriting 6 because of the DSQs ahead of him. Good result from them. Into the points they needed. Unfortunate about Ocon because I feel like he would have been thereabouts too.
Yeah, Ocon's had some bad luck this year, but I thought the cars and Gasly were on it. It was great to see. Obviously, we still, as we always say every week, Alpine still need to do more. But it's better not to be trouncing at the back, not getting the points, right? They're at least making more consistent headway, but they still need to step up a bit more. But Gasly did a good job.
Yeah.
Shame about the Ocon thing. Just those guys, we never really spoke about that, but that's just both elbows out for both of them.
Yeah, they were.
I was replaying it and watching. Ocon was trying to force Piastri to give up the entry to 3, and Piastri wasn't having anything to do with it, and so they met in the middle. So they're both at fault, really, so both not at fault, whatever way you want to call it. But that was kind of a fun. But that's what you call elbows out, and you're both hitting your elbows in the middle of the corner.
Yeah. Let's see. Aston Martin, Lance Stroll, P7, Alonso at a DNF. The team brought upgrades this weekend, but when they didn't seem to work well on Saturday, Paul, they opted to start from the pit lane, both cars, because they wanted to make some serious setup change, wing adjustments, those kind of things to try to cure what they felt like they saw on Saturday. Alonso even reverting back to the Qatar spec without the new upgrades, while Lance kept the new upgrades for the race. This seemed to actually work, and in both cases. Alonso came all the way back up to ninth. Unfortunately, had to retire the car with damage to his underfloor. I think he thought it was suspension damage, but I read later it may have been underfloor damage. So he had to retire the car. It's unfortunate because he was in the points. And then this promoted Lance up a spot, and then he managed to get by Tsunoda for P7 after the DSQ's ahead of him. All in all, for Lance, needed a good result and got one.
Yeah, I think it was great for both of them. Obviously, unfortunately, the damage to Alonso, but they both kind of were thereabouts within each other, within a couple of seconds of each other the whole time, yet both running completely different setups. Obviously, with Alonso, they went back to a tried and true setup and spec on the car. With Lance, they probably learned from why the car was so far off in qualifying, made some adjustments in setup to try and maximize the new aero, whatever they've got going on there, and he did very well. So I think it bodes well for the car's improvement that Lance was able to stay there and get in the points. I mean, he hasn't had some great results recently, so I think this is definitely a feather in his cap to help the team, with their process, with the evolution of the car, and also for Lance as a driver athlete in the car as well. I think it was great for both of them really to get those results.
Yeah, for sure. AlphaTauri, Daniel Ricciardo, P17, Yuki Tsunoda, P8. Yuki had a private war with both those Astons all race long. Was passed by Stroll late in the race to come home in an F-bomb filled P8. But wait, that's not all. Yuki put on softs late in the race and secured the fast lap point. So that was good for him. A good race for him. Let's see. Then Dan, he was on that one stopper and they stuck with it. Clearly not the right strategy. Also struggled with his tires, had some late damage to the car that slowed his pace. He said he feels better than he did on Saturday with his his hand, and got more race mileage in and has a lot to learn. And I'm thinking, okay, fair enough, but you're a veteran.
Why you're there. Yeah.
You really need a lot of learning here, to be honest with you. You just need more pace. But I don't know that the one stopper was ever going to give him more pace as compared to his teammate in Yuki's case. But a good run for Yuki for sure.
Yeah. I mean, important to get the extra point too. As we talked about last time, it's hard to fathom that the AlphaTauri is at the bottom of the manufacturers and the Red Bull, its cousin, is at the top by a long way. Yeah. So tough to see them down there. It's not been the best of seasons at all. We thought they'd struggle with the driver lineup, and obviously they did, and they still are to some degree. But to get those points and to go for the extra point, I think it was a good weekend for them. But they've still got a long way to go. Yeah.
Williams, Alex Albon, P9, Logan Sargent, P10. Do I get? Well, I've got that. First points of his career in Formula One. Yay, Logan Sargent. That's awesome. P10.
Yeah.
Albon started on used mediums, struggled to get up to 11th, but post-race disqualifications moved him and Logan into the points. Alex did get a track limit penalty. James Vowell said it was kind of interesting because right at the last part of the race, there was a rash of turn 6 infringements that popped up on the screen. And he said it's kind of strange, and we're going to look into it because that was a turn that really no one was really going wide at, and they're not quite sure if there was something wrong or, because he had two.
I don't know how you go wide at turn 6.
Yeah, he had 2 infringements.
You can cut the corner. Yeah.
Right, he had 2 lap infringements in 2 successive laps, and so I think the team wanted to check out if that was really the case or not. So they want to look at that data. And then Logan, as I mentioned, had a good race, scored points for his home Grand Prix, so that's good. Even had some good passes on Ricciardo Magnussen, Paul.
He did, yeah. Albon did his usual thing,
He did.
overachieved, but Sargent had an awful weekend up until this race. I mean, he was
Mm-hmm.
qualifying last, he was struggling, he was sick again. It was kind of like, what? I don't know. I thought I did a good lap, but he's the slowest guy on the track. But in the race, he came alive,
Yeah.
passed people, kept
Yeah.
himself, could see Albon the whole time. And that teaches you why you never give up, right? I
Yeah.
mean, it was a P12 for him, but it adjusted. So you always push because you never know what's going
You
to
never
happen.
know.
And he did. He kept himself honest, didn't make a mistake. So yeah, his best race of the year by far, I would say.
Yeah, no doubt. Haas F1, Nico Hulkenberg, P11, Kevin Magnussen, and P14. Haas also brought upgrades and couldn't get them to work on Saturday, so they started both cars from the pit lane, just like Aston did. They had made wing adjustments. That seemed to help, though. By doing that, it helped the team as well. Nico finished 13th, inherited P11 with the DSQs in front of him. So a good run from him. Looked pretty racy there, was making some decent passing. I kind of thought maybe he might nip into the points, Paul, but just outside of him.
Just a little
Just
outside.
out, yeah.
Yeah,
Just
but they were a bit more racy. No, I don't think they made the leaps and bounds. It looked initially, actually, maybe they did make the leaps and bounds over their race pace, but in the end, didn't quite pan out. Although obviously they did beat the other team, Alfa Romeo team. So at least that's
Those other guys.
positive, I suppose. But yeah, a bit more racy. Maybe made a bit of headway, but from where they've been, they've got a long road to hoe. So yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and Kevin said that the changes were better after they made them, but still, they said we just still wasn't fast enough. It does make you wonder if the Haas upgrades may have helped this weekend, or if it's just a sign that they can't overcome the main issue with that car, which may not be at this point remotely solvable without a chassis design change in total. They've brought several updates. I wouldn't say they were been flush with upgrades all season, but within budget, I think this weekend bringing those upgrades, they were hoping they would make some advancement. I guess the jury's out. Could be track centric, but we'll have to see.
Yeah.
That leaves those other guys. Alfa
What are
Romeo.
their names again?
Yeah.
That's right.
Valtteri Bottas in P12, Joe Guan Yu in P13. Valtteri had both cars drifted backwards, to be fair, from where they started. Joe boxed very early on for the hard, and Bottas followed suit a lap later. Despite having the right strategy, they just lacked pace, seemed to lose pace over the course of the weekend, which is a shame. Ultimately, Joe feels it came down to tire degradation that hampered their pace, and he doesn't think anything they would have tried from a strategy point of view really would have changed things given their degradation. And it was unfortunate because it seemed like they started out the weekend, faster than where they finished, right? And so they
and
lost
the first
pace
half of the
over
race, for that matter.
Yeah.
They were there or thereabouts with the AlphaTauris, with the Haas's, the Williams cars at the beginning, but then Ace and Joe set sail for the pits to open, and everyone cut steaming in. But yeah, they weren't able to jump on that strategy that they initiated, basically.
Yeah, exactly right. So that's how the teams finished. Let's hand out some awards. We typically do that. The first award we always give out is Move the Race.
My gift to you.
I give to you these two droids. Both are hardworking. Yeah, go ahead, Paul. Move of the race.
Move of the race. I'm going to say the on-the-fly strategy calls. I thought it was there was a lot of movement going on back there in every garage as to what the hell we should do next. Some won, some lost, but overall, I think the ones that won just really made a difference in their team's finishing positions. It was good stuff.
I'm with you. I had Red Bull boxing early, forcing everyone's hand on that strategy. You kind of showed, whoa, okay, for one stoppers. Now we got to crunch Red Bull numbers to see if them boxing now is going to destroy our one stopper. Do we need to switch to a two stopper? Quick, somebody get a calculator. And they eventually forced everyone's hand. So I think in aggregate, I agree with you. I think it was the offset strategies that was a lot of fun to watch and helped as a fan at home that we could follow them. And so that was good. Enjoyed that. Next award is Donkey of the Race.
We'll do it live.
Oh boy, donkey of the race. There wasn't glowing donkeys, I would say.
No, not in the cockpit. There wasn't.
No.
Or in the strategy room for that matter. But
No, not really.
definitely I think the track limits, eternal track limits debate back and forth that goes on forever. You see it on Facebook, Twitter. They should do this. They should do that. They should do this.
Yeah.
That. Well, let's just make those white lines like 10 feet wide, and then we have no
Right.
track limits. And let's just do what everyone says and just use every bit of road that you can use.
Right. You can see it.
That was the interesting solution. We're
Yeah,
just
wasn't it?
going to make the white line wider.
Wider. Yeah.
What the hell?
So you can see like 3 a.m. Joe Bauer out there with some dude's got a flashlight and he's out there painting that strip a little wider.
No.
They'll never know. No one will know. We solved it.
Yeah.
That was my white lines was my my donkey of the race.
Yeah.
Finally, drive of the race.
Get down. Get down.
Yes, drive of the race, Paul. Who'd you have?
I'm gonna go a little off target here.
Off target? Get out of here.
I thought there was a couple of phenomenal drives, but ultimately I'm gonna give it as a co-champions of the drive of the race. I'm gonna give it to Logan and Lance, as I said, because
Logan. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Good.
because it's so hard for a driver to pull up their bootstraps and just put in a good race when they've been beaten over their head with failure over the past few races. It really is.
Yeah, for sure.
And for these guys to do what they did, I think was very impressive. I think they did themselves all good. It should Logan especially so. We've seen Lance's frustrations.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think Lance, especially because he's dealing with a whole new setup and dynamic for the car, but executing and getting the points. I think they both did a hell of a job out there. So they both deserve the rule. Congratulations, fellas.
Yeah, that's a good shout. I was less empathetic than that. And I went with the guy who I think aced this whole freaking weekend.
Get in there, Lewis.
I'm going to give it to Lewis. I think Lewis had a fantastic. I know Lando got driver of the race, and
Or did he win Dish of the Day as well? They used to have this award in the British tracks, Dish of the Day, the best, that voted by the women or the girl marshals. I can't remember what it was. They voted for their favorite driver.
That'd be Lando.
Yeah, that would be Lando.
Yeah, it'd definitely be Lando. Lando, as Zach calls him, Lando. Well, I think Lando's done real well. So it's that Midwestern accent Zach has. He can't get away from it. I live here too, Zach. So I'm right there with you, buddy. Yes, I think I agree. I concur.
Okay.
Yes, I do. Yeah, Lando driver of the race. Mine is Lewis. I think Lewis just looked pumped up this weekend. He was up for a fight. Loves this track. Does well at this track. Loves to win. In America. He loves America. As he said, he loves it's a progressive country, he said in post-race interview. Working that crowd was Lewis. And the woman, with the hand in the face, right?
Yeah.
There you go.
Pretty progressive.
Yeah, it is. Very. So, attaboy, Lewis. Good weekend, good recovery. Love to see him back on song, motivated, wants to win. Love the bit between his teeth, taking no prisoners. It's good race weekend for him.
Yeah, definitely.
And Mercedes. Toto was magnanimous about the disqualification. He says, look, there's no tolerance. We got to take it on the chin. It's the same for everyone. It is what it is. We were wrong. And they move on.
Yep.
Let's do some quick mailbag.
You've got mail.
I have a couple questions from the website from Worthless Opinion. You may see a little bit of a theme here.
Worthless Opinion.
Yeah. And it may give you a little insight that Worthless Opinion would very much approve of my drive of the race because his questions are twofold. Number one, why was Max allowed to push Leclerc off the track while passing in a turn?
Mm-hmm.
Remember when he made that pass on Leclerc and they both went wide there? And number two, why was Verstappen allowed to cross the track and push Leclerc off the track at the start of the sprint?
Mm-hmm.
Why, Paul? Why?
I'll give you a worthless answer.
Okay. You want my worthless opinion on this?
No, it was a worthless opinion.
That's right.
It's yes, I understand the frustration, because I was looking at it and was like, well, remember Brazil, and there's Max running Lewis all the way off and this and that, and where are those lines? I think it depends on.
Well, it's
you're
the
supposed to give
Schumacher
a driver
chop.
room, right? You're supposed to give a driver a width, but it's like when does the driver actually have the corner? And you'll see it a lot of times where the driver's just got that car half inside and they run out to the edge of the road. You don't always see what happens to the driver behind, where they choose to back off and pull in. They could choose to stay on the outside, but they don't. But usually when the driver comes over on them and is starting to use all the road, they back off because better to fight another day, right, than lose right now. And Charles just chose to keep driving on the outside. I think it's a common maneuver, but Charles trying to made it look a little bit more dramatic than maybe it should be. But I do understand the sentiment that you're supposed to give a car width, and that should be within the confines of the track also, according to their rules.
Well, I looked at his onboard, and I don't think he was as alongside Max as maybe what that angle at the top looked like. His onboard, he was on the inside about halfway up, but I think it looked a little more dramatic.
But that's what I'm saying. When is it his corner and when it's room, right?
Right.
But then how do you race like that? You got to race. So I get that it's a bit of a fuzzy area, maybe inconsistent. Never heard that before, but I get it. I can't answer the question exactly why.
It was first lap
that's
too.
My thoughts and sentiments. First lap, they let things go a little bit looser.
Yeah, first lap on the second question. Yeah.
Was there more room? Because we saw the deal with Max inside Charles at turn 12, and where Leclerc went all the way off the track, and Max was still on the track, but they were side by side again. But
well, the question there is I think he was making an observation in his mind too, was that Leclerc was on the outside, Max dove down the inside, locked up, outbraked him, and went into the corner, and then they both went out wide, and it looked like Max was pushing him out wide off the track.
Right.
But the reality of it is, I went back and looked at that. I mean, Max did get, axle to axle. It wasn't like Max just flew in and did a Gran Turismo where you were never going to make that corner. He made the corner.
Yeah.
He stopped. He made the apex and made the corner. Now he's going to track out wide for sure. And
the question is, should he give up that exit to allow for Charles, who was alongside him? And when does that position stop?
Yeah.
When do you not give up that exit?
Right.
And I think predominantly as it's worked in most passes that we see, is the car's at least half a car length ahead, and then basically the law is you give up the corner if you're on your outside, because you're never going to win that battle. Right.
And I think we saw that with Lewis. Was it Lewis on Max at turn 1? Ran him out wide.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. For sure. Yeah, absolutely he did.
Yeah. And so, I think they have a little more leeway.
Yeah, that's how Lewis got. Yeah, absolutely. That's what Lewis did. So.
Yep. Good question, as always, and a good race. I enjoyed it. Paul, we're going to be back this time next week talking about the Mexican Grand Prix.
Whoa!
We got a triple
craziest race on the calendar.
Thrice 3 triple. Yes.
In a row, yeah.
3 in a row.
Man, I thought my season was over and you get me back to work.
I know.
That's crazy.
I know. I was going to have Grace come in, but she was disqualified. She,
Oh, yeah.
Too low ride height
thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it happens. But we'll be back next week to do it all over again. Now, if you like this podcast, you can go over and give us a good rating at your favorite podcast player. That would help us out, obviously. If you love this podcast, you want to support us like the other fantastic Patreon supporters, you can go to our website on the right-hand side, or even at the bottom of the left. It just says support us. You can click on that. Support us, there's multiple ways you can support us there for as little as $1 a month. You can do that. As much
as $1 million. I think you take $1 million.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think that would be good. And if we didn't have Patreon supporters, we wouldn't and couldn't do this podcast. So big thank you to all of our Patreon supporters, and thanks for the interaction and answering my question about live audience for Patreon supporters over on Patreon. So I'm going to try to work on that and see if we can't pull that off for our Patreon supporters. So that
now, if you do a live audience, are they going to have to be like dressed in like the Price is Right gear, like
with the name tag?
Yeah.
Paul.
Come on down. You get to ask a question. Yeah.
A new car. Yeah. No, they won't be seen, but they will be able to see us and hear us, and they'll be able to interact with us, I think, in chat. So there you go. So I'm working on that, guys. I'm trying to get my chops again. This isn't a day job for me. I've got a day job. I got to figure this out in the evenings and weekends, but I'm working on that. But huge thank you. If you if you've got a worthless opinion you want to share on this race, you can go to theparkfermé.com. Yeah, right. Theparkfermé.com. Just and leave a comment on this podcast or any other stories that I've posted. And until next week, when we come back to do all over again, this is Todd, aka Negative Camber, saying so long.
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over.